Imagine a world where the most critical decisions of a state, whether to start a war, found a new city, or appoint a leader, depended not on analytics or strategy, but on the appearance of the internal organs of a freshly sacrificed animal. This isn't a scene from a fantasy novel. It was a real historical practice known as Haruspicy, the art of divination using entrails, especially the liver. This method, perfected by the Haruspicy's priests in ancient Etruria and later adopted by the Romans, was treated as a rigorous science with strict rules. But why the liver? In ancient cultures, this organ was considered the seat of life force and emotion, a kind of control center for a living being. To a diviner, the liver was a microcosm, a miniature reflection of the universe. Its surface was divided into sectors, each corresponding to a specific deity. Any deviation from the norm, an unusual color, a strange shape, or the presence of growths or blemishes was interpreted as a sign, a message from the gods that had to be deciphered. To train apprentice priests, they even created special clay models of livers with a detailed map of these divine zones. For instance, the right side of the organ was typically associated with good fortune, while the left side signaled impending failure. Priests would meticulously study every fold and every fissure, looking for divine meaning. The true danger of haruspicy wasn't just its gruesome nature. It was the outsourcing of critical thinking to superstition. Instead of relying on human reason and judgment, powerful leaders placed the fate of entire nations in what they believed to be the will of the gods, written in the flesh and blood of an animal. A single oddly shaped liver could halt an army or ruin an alliance, making it one of history's most high-stakes forms of prophecy. Voices from the grave, the practice of necromancy. If haruspicy sought divine will in the bodies of animals, necromancy aimed for something far more direct and taboo, consulting the dead themselves. This wasn't simply communicating with spirits. It was the practice of summoning the deceased, often through complex and grim rituals, to extract forbidden knowledge and prophecies about the future. Historically, necromancy was considered one of the darkest and most powerful forms of divination. Why? Because it promised a shortcut past the gods and other intermediaries, going straight to a source that had already crossed the ultimate frontier. One of the most famous accounts comes from the Bible, where the Witch of Endor summons the spirit of the prophet Samuel for a desperate King Saul, who then learns of his impending doom. This story perfectly captures the essence of necromancy, seeking guidance from the dead in a moment of extreme crisis. From a scientific and psychological perspective, the true danger of necromancy lay not in vengeful spirits, but in its profound manipulation of the human mind. The practice preys on our deepest fears and desires, particularly grief and the longing for closure. A person desperate to speak with a lost loved one is incredibly vulnerable. Any message from the other side, whether fabricated by a charlatan or imagined by the practitioner, would carry immense emotional weight, capable of driving a person to obsession or ruin. It's the ultimate form of psychological exploitation, turning love and loss into a tool for dangerous predictions. The Oracle's poisonous breath, prophecy in an altered state. Not all dark divination required blood or bones. Some of the most influential prophecies in history were delivered in a state of trance, seemingly induced by the gods themselves. The most legendary example is the Oracle of Delphi, a priestess known as the Pythia, whose cryptic utterances could make or break empires. For centuries, her power was believed to be a divine gift from the god Apollo. Modern science, however, offers a more grounded and equally fascinating explanation. Geological studies of the temple's location have revealed fissures in the rock that likely emitted psychoactive gases, such as ethylene. When inhaled in a confined space, this gas can induce a trance-like state, causing euphoria, altered perceptions, and disjointed speech. The Pythia wasn't channeling a god, she was likely experiencing the effects of a natural hallucinogen. Her incoherent mumblings were then taken by the temple priests, who translated them into the ambiguous poetic prophecies that became her trademark. Herein lies the danger. The process created an almost unassailable form of authority. You had a priestess in a visible, divinely inspired frenzy, and a class of educated priests to interpret her divine words. The prophecy wasn't just a prediction, it was a sacred revelation delivered through a mind that had seemingly touched another world. This combination of an altered state of consciousness and clever interpretation made the prophecies incredibly persuasive. Believing the oracle's words weren't a choice, but a sacred duty, leading people and kings to act on advice born from intoxicating fumes rising from the earth. The deadly trap of interpretation, when prophecy kills. Perhaps the most insidious danger of any form of divination lies not in the ritual or the source, but in its final, critical step, human interpretation. Ancient prophecies were rarely straightforward. They were masterpieces of ambiguity, riddles wrapped in poetry. This wasn't a flaw, it was a psychological masterstroke that made them both powerful and deadly. The classic cautionary tale is that of Croesus, the fantastically wealthy king of Lydia. Before launching an attack on the rising Persian Empire, he consulted the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle's response became one of the most famous in history. If you cross the Halys River, you will destroy a great empire. Filled with confidence, Croesus interpreted this as a guarantee of his own victory. He attacked, was utterly defeated, and the great empire that was destroyed turned out to be his own. The oracle was, technically, correct. The prophecy's power was in its vagueness. It exploited a fundamental aspect of human psychology, confirmation bias. Croesus wanted to go to war, so he heard the answer he was looking for. The prophecy didn't give him new information. It gave him divine permission to do what he already intended to do. This is the ultimate trap. A vague prediction places the burden of responsibility entirely on the believer. It can be twisted to justify any action, from personal choices to declarations of war. It creates a feedback loop where belief in the prophecy directly causes the foreseen outcome, a phenomenon known as a self-fulfilling prophecy. The prediction itself is inert. The real danger is the actions people take because they believe they have seen the future. Why did the dark arts fade? The gruesome practices of Haruspicy and the forbidden whispers of necromancy no longer dictate state policy or dominate cultural belief systems. While a fascination with divination persists, these ancient, dangerous methods have largely vanished from the mainstream. Their decline wasn't caused by a single event, but by a slow, powerful shift in human thought across three key areas: science, religion, and ethics. First, the rise of the scientific method provided a new framework for understanding the world. Where once the liver of a sheep was seen as a divine map, biology and anatomy offered a different explanation, one based on function and observable reality, not symbolism. As our understanding of psychology, geology, and chemistry grew, phenomena like the oracle's trances could be explained by natural causes rather than divine intervention. Science didn't necessarily disprove the gods, but it offered a far more reliable and less bloody way to make decisions. Second, the world's major monotheistic religions, particularly Christianity and Islam, actively condemned these practices. They reframed divination not as a path to divine knowledge, but as a sinful act of defiance against the one true God, or worse, as consorting with demonic forces. This religious shift systematically dismantled the spiritual authority of oracles and necromancers, recasting them from wise seers into dangerous heretics. Finally, our collective ethical standards evolved. The idea of sacrificing an animal to make a political decision, or desecrating a grave for a glimpse of the future, became morally repellent to later societies. A growing sense of humanism placed more value on reason, individual responsibility, and empathy. The dark arts, with their reliance on fear, death, and manipulation, simply couldn't survive in a world that was slowly learning to value human life and intellect over superstitious ritual. They faded into history, leaving behind a crucial lesson. The tools we use to predict the future tell us less about what is to come and more about who we are in the present. Make sure you like and subscribe. See you later.